My name is Joellen. I'm from firstediting.com, and today I have with me Christina Stanley from fictionary.co, and we are ready. So let me get to my stuff that I want to cover today. Basically, we have a 4-part series that we're doing right now, and we are with the first one we did last week was editing with Excel and beyond. And that was all the traditional editing styles and what it was with Excel and how you had to cross-reference in the books and how it really, really depended upon the editor having some experience. And then it was up to them how they subjectively worked that into their evaluation of your book. So now it's changing. If you missed that series, of course, it's here, and just drop us a line and we'll gladly send you the link to where you can watch that. This is the second of the 4-part series today, and we will be talking about the evolution of editing. So how to update and simplify it. And that's why Christina's here, because it's all about story editing now. And Christina, you have Fictionary, and you're revolutionizing the way that my editors do editing and the way that I think all of the writers out there will experience it and what they will expect, and not only expect but demand from their editors. So that's pretty cool. And today we're going to talk about all the different levels of editing and kind of a little bit of the process. We're not going to dig in too deep, but we're going to make sure that you know what we're talking about, so that when you are talking to your professional editor, you know the terms, you know where you are in the which stage you are in the process of editing. So we're going to do that. And then next week, make sure you sign up again. We will have leaving the Excel behind us, and we're going to show you we're going to start on the how to objectively edit, and that will include the 38 story elements from Fictionary that Christina has outlined for all the editors, and we're going to show you behind the scenes how to do that yourself for self-editing, or what to discuss with your editors in that sense. So again, remember to sign up for next week, and then the week after, we will have how to structurally edit like a pro. And this is where we will walk you through the whole entire process and let you see what we do and see if you want to do it for yourself or if you'd like to get some help. And that's completely up to you. But again, editing is very important. So Christina, feel free to pop in here.
Sure. Yeah. One thing that's really interesting for me, as always, is to go through the different levels of story editing. And I remember when I first started writing and I was looking them up, and there was all these terms for substantive, developmental, content, structural, line editing, copy editing, proofreading. It was really confusing. And I really didn't know what any of them were. And I was just attempting all of them at the same time. And so today we're going to talk through the different types, a little bit about when it's good to do the different types of editing so that you're most efficient with your time. And I mean, Joellen's an expert in all of them because her editors cover all of them. I only focus on one piece. So a lot of that will be from her, which is great. So maybe I'll learn something too.
Oh, well, I think that's great. And we'll pop into those. I want to really show the foundation today. And we covered a lot of that last time about, how this evolved, because we're doing traditional copy editing, which you can get with tools, and line editing, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But really where we're evolving into, where we're headed, was based upon a lot of the research from books and from basically using Excel to cross-reference those different methods. And you created the background of that. It's all patented and whatever, specially licensed. So walk us through what we talked about last week, kind of the Excel, because Christina, right, if you don't know, is a published author, an award-winning author, and all those great things, has had an agent. I'll let you expand on all that. But she's very successful in doing this personally. And then she's actually taken that experience and made it accessible to other authors. So tell us more.
Terrific. So while I do that, Joellen, do you want to put a link in for where to sign up for next week? We've got a few questions on the side.
Okay. It's on the, it is on Eventbrite, but I will get it for you.
I'm just going to share my screen. And then I'm going to share just quickly. So are you seeing the Excel spreadsheet, Joellen?
I am.
Okay, perfect. So last week when we went into this, I wanted just to show everybody where I started with my editing. So what you're seeing here is the actual spreadsheet that I used for my first novel, which is the novel that I got an agent with. And so just behind, you're seeing all of the different, not all of them, but a subset of the different story elements that I use to evaluate my story. And so what I did before Fictionary is I used Excel and I used MS Word. So it could be any kind of spreadsheet. The Mac one is numbers, or it could be you're writing a Google Docs or Scrivener or whatever it is. But at that point, it was really having two things open at the same time and bouncing back and forth between the two and trying to figure out what, elements I needed to evaluate, try to get story. And so this is actually the first part of my opening scene of a very early draft of Descent. At the time, it was called Final Gate. And whoever was saying they changed their titles, well, my publisher just changed it for me. So, there it was. I liked Final Gate, but apparently it wasn't the right title. So it's now Descent. But we went through basically last week all of these different story elements to look at what a writer can look at for themselves and how you can evaluate your own story just using a simple spreadsheet. And so you don't have to get fancy with technology. We also talked about Trello a little bit last week on how you could do a similar thing in Trello. So there are options. Obviously, my favorite is Fictionary because it's mine. But oops, now I got to stop sharing somehow. Sorry, I've lost my. Oh, that's terrible. Hang on. Thank you.
No problem.
Went. But let me find that again. Yeah, so that's where we were. So Joellen's going to take us forward from there, from last week.
Okay, so basically we went from there, and we also talked about a lot of the books. And if you want to name off, there was a couple of top ones: Save the Cat, Story Grid, and some others that have been instrumental in creating this. So let me pull up mine, but you can kind of reiterate on those right quickly. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I usually have them at my feet. We talked about Story by Robert McKee, which is one on film, but just as relevant. We talked about Save the Cat, which has a 15-beat method based on the guy who wrote Save the Cat writes a screenplay whose name I just forgot, which is terrible. We did Sid Field and a few others. We did the hero's journey, and the writer's journey was the fifth one that we talked about.
Excellent. So those were all put together, and that's how we are creating a more objective, in the same way that you have set the syntax, rules, and regulations when you're doing basic copy editing, which we're about to talk about. Then, when we've created this 38 story elements and put them into a checklist of sorts and made it more objective for the writer and the editor, it allows us to know how comprehensive and how full of an editing you're receiving. But before we go into that, what I want to do is cover the 3 levels of editing that we've been offering prior to going into a structural story edit. So the first one is copy editing. And copy editing, you can, again, this is something that you can use a lot of tools. Both Christina and I are big fans of Pro Writing Aid. There's Grammarly. There's all kinds of ones out there that can do different copy editing. They're style helpers, and they do the grammar, spelling, punctuation. They do different types of writing. So what I wanted to do is just show you here a little bit of this is basically a basic level 1 copy edit. We call it level 1 because it's the most simple. It's grammar, spelling, punctuation, a little bit of style. Copy editing is really your final edit before you go into formatting. So it's always good to have a professional look through it, but they're not going to get into your style. They're not going to make sure that you've been consistent throughout as much as they're just going to make sure your sentences are correct and that you're following syntax more or less to the T. And it's to catch any last minute mistakes before you go out, to kind of save your reputation as we go. Anything you want to add to that, Christina?
Well, I just thought it's probably a good time to mention what's the difference between copy editing and proofreading.
Copy editing, proofreading, exactly. Copy editing is before formatting, and proofreading is after you've uploaded and you've gone into the formatting of your book. So once you've uploaded, quite often it can change around, it can move. So the proofread is to see the entire manuscript as its final presentation and make sure that it all makes sense. Because sometimes it can move around, and also it's that, again, that last minute shine to make sure, oops, somebody forgot to put a quotation mark or a comma or whatever, that you hope they catch it. And we've all been there. You read through a all-time bestseller and you're like, this is great. And then at least as an editor, you just go, I can't believe this is such a big mistake here. It's either a typo or the wrong word or whatever. And that's really where, you're trying to get those, it's always good to use a fresh editor when you change the different stages of editing, because once you know the story, you get so far into it that your brain goes on autopilot and doesn't see it. So you really want to have a specialized copy editor for doing that, a proofreader for that level. So that's where we're looking at those different ones there.
Yeah, and there, I mean, I have an interesting personal story there with my publisher on my first book. I had the opportunity to do a final proofread before it went live, and I didn't understand the difference between copy edit, line edit, et cetera, at that time, and so I suggested some line edit type changes, and my publisher was not very happy about that way too late in the process. So, I got a little bit of a smackdown there. Oh, don't do that now. I think, okay, learned that proofreading is just, you're looking for typographical errors, or like Joellen said, a missing quote or something, but not any changes past that. So that was kind of a hard, a little bit embarrassing personal learning for me that I just didn't know at the time.
Yeah, when you get into copy editing, you're done. There's no more revisions. Line editing, which is what we're going to look at right now. Line editing is when you're doing the revisions. It's when maybe you've already done all your structure, or you've definitely done all your structural. Don't get me wrong. You've done all your structural. You've done all of your complete outline. You've got all those major things, all your key scenes there in place. You've got your plot, your characters, your development. You're not doing any more development, any more substance moving, blah. Okay, it stays where it is. When you're doing line editing, that's when you're looking for consistency. Your voice stays the same, that it flows well, that that you might have left out something, maybe this happens all the time. The name of the character changed. How did that happen? You just, those little things that are there, and that's when your editor is looking through those. So if you're going into a professional line edit, and again, this is what your agent, or we also do academic. So if you're a professor or somebody like that, your beta readers, they may say, this really needs to be edited. They're normally talking about at least a line edit, because this is where it gets a little nitty gritty. And let's see here. I'll just share this with you. You'll see that there's a little bit more of the, a little bit more comments. You get a full comments here. You're going more, the grammar, spelling, punctuation is still part of this. It's still pretty heavy. They should be picking up all those major changes, verb tenses, consistency, transitions, yeah, all that. And they're doing it line by line and chapter to chapter to make sure that it's flowing and that it's consistent. And the editor is not going to change your voice. If you want the character to have a specific dialect or sound, they're going to help you maintain that in the way that it needs to be artistically. So these are important things that they're doing, but they're not changing big gaps in your plot. They're not pointing out where they may point out, but they're not going to fix or go deeply into correcting, why there's no connection with your protagonist, or why the scene just feels weak. And that will really come back to the editor, but of their experience, but they're not doing it in a methodical method at this point in terms of the structure. They're doing it methodically for the syntax, methodically for the style and voice. So this is, and they will also, sorry, I did want to mention that they will give you some feedback here. And I included this on here. Again, I know you can't really see a lot on the screen, but they'll go into the line editing content comments, and you'll expect some feedback. They should be, you should expect communication from your editor. They're your expert, and they should be giving you some advice on what to do to make it better. Go ahead.
Well, two things I was just going to say. One is on the name changing. On, I think, my second book, halfway through, I changed the name of one of my main characters and had no idea. And my editor said, "Who's this Jack person?" I'm like, Jack? I have no Jack in my book. And in my mind, the character's name had changed. And so when I was reading it, even when I reread it, I didn't even see that I'd done that. And the editor picked that up during the line edit. Rod has a question that's kind of appropriate to answer now. I use Pro Writing Aid. I always get a low score on active voice. How can I best learn how to improve this score? So for anyone out there who isn't sure what Rod is talking about, there's active and there's passive voice. And active is basically Jack kicked the ball, and passive is the ball was kicked by Jack. And so active is fast-paced, passive is slow-paced. Active is putting the focus on the subject, and passive is putting the focus on the object. And the way to find that, the first place to do is do a scan for where you're using was, and look for the ball was kicked by Jack. And then see if you can flip it around. And you look for how many sentences. And sometimes you don't want to because you have a stylistic way that you want to say something. And maybe it's really the ball that's important to the story and not Jack. And so you want the ball was kicked by Jack because that's where the reader's going to focus. It's the first words in the sentence, then the other way around. So to improve that score, you want to be careful. You're not just improving going, I want to improve my score because Pro Writing Aid pointed it out for me. What Pro Writing Aid is doing is pointing it out so you can decide if you want to change it as the writer. And if you're writing a really active fist fight scene, for example, then you don't want a lot of passive. There's action, action, action. If you're writing a more slow down, take a breather scene, you can go a little bit more into passive, and there's a balance there. But the first thing you want to do is look at that word was, and then you can start seeing through how often are you doing it, and can you flip sentences around.
Exactly. Very well done. And we're getting a lot more comments in here, so we'll take some as we go. But I just want to quickly show you the next level of where we've been with editing, and that has always been the content edit. And the content, has been described as your developmental, substantive, structural editing. But it's all been subjective. I mean, not completely. Remember, all of our editors have experience in, publishing. They have experience in their genre. They're trained in literature. They have PhDs, whatever. That being said, it's still been more or less subjective. So what I want to show you here is that, there we go. As we go into a professional content editing, then you're getting a lot more in regards to, let's see here. You're doing some of your grammar, spelling, punctuation, but you're not changing it all. And you are getting a lot of feedback on how to fix some of those errors. But one of the interesting things is that if you were not evaluating the whole manuscript, and we still offer this because some people want a deep edit as much as you can be for the information you have in front of you. So they kind of want their hands held as they go, but they don't have the full script yet. So that's when you go into the story arc and the story development. So you get a lot more feedback and consultation on how to fix each scene, but you really, really need to have a comprehensive, objective approach to the overall manuscript, which is what we are now looking at and going into the future of how we're going to do story structural editing. So this is a line edit, just to kind of show you. You get a lot more comments. Basically, it makes it bleed. You'll see that they're really doing as much as they can, but it's not just that. It's not just the grammar, spelling, punctuation. It's still going into the deeper perspectives there. But that's not near as exciting as what I want us to go into now, which is the structural story editing. Now, all of the editors at First Editing are certified story editors. story coaches, for from Fictionary, which is Christina's come in. And we've been very excited about this. As the CEO at First Editing, I saw that this was a game changer. This is where we're going. This is what's happening. And really, because the technological world we're in is changing so fast, it's amazing that we haven't changed the way we edit. Christina and I talked about this last week, that, people are using Excel, which was created, did we say 89? I think it was
82 or 83.
Yeah, and Word track changes, which I've just sat there and showed you, has not changed since 1985. And so there's all this going on, but we're still using old tools. But now Christina's brought this in, and it really, as a company, it allows us to give a satisfaction guarantee. We can definitely double check to see that you've got a comprehensive edit. If for some reason you feel like, I'm not satisfied with my edit here, we can come in with other editors, say, what areas were overlooked, mistaken, whatever it may be. So it's a fantastic way to combine that subjective editing that we're so familiar with, and to make it more comprehensive, following the form of, traditional storytelling, and making sure that all the necessary elements are there. So Christina, take us into that.
Okay, so what we want to cover, we're going to look at 5 key things that you should, from a high level point of view this week. We're going to look at overall structure of a story, and 5 kind of key things that you should be looking at, whether you're editing your own story or you've hired a professional story editor. Then they should be looking at these key things for you. So what I'm going to show you is an actual edit. So I wrote this novel, Evolution, to use in our Story Coach certification program. And it's been edited, I don't know,
many times.
Like 40 times now, maybe. So I have a lot of edits on this manuscript, which one day I'd love to rewrite, because I have a lot of edits on this manuscript. However, it's all been done in Story Coach. And so what happens, because it's done in Story Coach, the edits are really consistent, and they all have to cover the same things. And so, as a writer, if you're going to hire an editor, you're going to get a top-notch edit. So you can do all of these things on your own. So we have Fictionary StoryTeller, which is the way you would do it if you're editing your own story, and Fictionary Story Coach, which is if you're an editor doing someone else's story. And when they do that, they click a little button, and their completed edit goes over to a Story Coach account for the writer. And so they get a full edit within a Fictionary account. So I'm going to start with the story arc, although I probably have to share my screen first.
Yes, ma'am.
My strong
point. I would love to see your story arc. And the story arc is so essential, because basically your editor, you should be requiring them to make sure that they're fulfilling all of the 5 key scenes, and that your manuscript follows this form.
Mm-hmm. So are you seeing the story arc?
Yes, ma'am. It's right in front of us.
Perfect. That's very good. So this is, so the editor who did this book went through and marked all of the key scenes for me, and basically gave reasons for why they chose the inciting incident, plot point 1, the middle, plot point 2, and the climax. And you can see here, plot point 1 is too early.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, too late. It's too close to the middle. And what that means, you can see from the inciting incident how it really goes flat here over to plot point 1. The story is going to start to drag about here, because plot point 1 should be really back here. And by this point, the reader's expectation is something has to happen, that we've had this inciting incident, and now not enough is going on to actually get the story to plot point 1, which is the point of no return for the protagonist. So drag, 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 slow. And then all of a sudden, the story is going to feel like it lacks depth here, because it's going too fast from plot point 1 to the middle. And so if you're evaluating this yourself, this is what you're looking for, to see how far off. And these are ranges, so you want to be generally in the area. As I always say, it's form, not formula. We're not looking to go right on that dot. We're looking generally in each of the areas. So the climax here is a little bit late, but it doesn't look too bad. the first thing I would do is look at this. And so here I can see, okay, what scene is this? So it's scene 37. Well, I'm going to see if the editor went and actually told me anything about scene 37. So this is my scene 37, and I've highlighted here what the editor said was, I've labeled this scene as plot point 1, where Jazz sees Poppy's dream and knows Nick was killed. This occurs way too late in the story right now, but I think shifting the scene earlier will work, because she would be doing, and then it goes into the story description. So you don't need to know all of this. And the bolding is mine. I put that there so I could highlight to you how to look at this and then go, okay, so I have a plot point, but it's just in the wrong place. And so what I want to do is I could go back here and think, okay, really, I want it somewhere around scene 20-ish. And I would go back and look and see where it fits in on the story. So I'll stop there. Joellen, you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think the really cool thing here is that, when you bring up the screen where you can see the actual manuscript itself on the screen, which is, there are lots of writing tools out there, but to have an editing tool that allows you to do it is definitely unique. So the editor is looking through here. And then one of the great things is that they're using those 38 story elements. And again, we'll go into that deeper in next week. We can't do it all today. We'll be here all night. But you'll see that we have next to all of those information, you're filling in those different points, that if you don't understand one of the concepts there, if you don't have the vocabulary that your editor is using, then you can't really communicate clearly. And what this does is there is an intelligent assistant there who is basically answering those questions. So if you want to have more, then you can read it. And what this allows your editor to tell you, or why it's important that we're looking at this from the evolution of editing, I guess, is that you can learn more, and you can learn from this, and you can understand exactly what they are, and you can reference it at your disposal. It's not during that one-time consultation, or even if you set up a series of consultations, you can come back when you're ready and it all goes in, and you can learn more about point of view, you can learn more about active voice, whatever. So we're looking at these, and I really think that that's great. And with the story arc, you get more and more familiar with the different areas of the storyline and where you're following.
Yeah, and so if you're using an editor, they'll put notes in this notes section, but you as a writer can also do that in StoryTeller when you're editing. Sometimes you just want to put notes over there of, this scene's in the wrong place, or rewrite this, it's chunky, or whatever it is. And you can just do your notes here and keep going. And as Joellen mentioned, there's the story elements, but we're not going to look at that today. We're going to have a look at the word count per scene. Exactly. So when a manuscript goes into Fictionary, whether it's StoryTeller or Story Coach, the word count per scene is drawn for you. And the thing to do in your manuscript is what you're looking at here is pacing. And so if I look at this scene 33, it's a bit long compared to others. And I tend to write in short scenes. So just my style doesn't mean you have to. You can write however you want. But for me, I look at this and I think, well, what is this scene? That's a bit long. Okay, I know what it is. I'm going to go and have a look and see, did the editor say anything about this? Is there anything I can do to make it a little bit shorter? So it's scene 33. So I would go back to the evaluate page and just scroll down and find my scene 33. There it is. And then here, the editor has said, and you can see the editor here has done some track changes and things for me and has some comments on this scene. But basically, see notes below, but if you do keep this scene, it needs to be split into two. The training class and the confrontation with Jim, which is a separate scene. So I can scroll down and look in here and see we're still in the training class. There'll be some point in here, right here. The editor has marked it. Okay, 25 minutes after my class. So there's a time change there. So here's a great spot to go. End it here, start it here. And so the editor has very nicely pointed out to me, just put a scene break here and you're good. And now I've got two scenes. And what that would mean then, if I look at the word count per scene, I'm now down around 800 words because that just happened to be in the middle and it was a natural point to do that. So that's something you can look at yourself. It's not hard to do. You know your own book. You look at the word count and look for the outlier scenes, and then look for anywhere the point of view changed, the timing changed, or the location changed. And those are natural points to get your word count back in order.
Right. And it's really cool because as soon as you do that, if you're unable to see that, or if your editor makes the recommendations, whatever it is, once you play with that, it will actually adjust your story arc, and you can see immediately. So that allows you to see, if you're headed in the right direction or not. And you can actually, experiment around with this. But the cool thing is again, we talk about, you have the editor can do this, or you can do it yourself. But either way, this allows better communication. You can see the elements and the details, the deliverables that an editor should be providing now, so that it was comprehensive. I think too often people thought they've had a very thorough edit, and lo and behold, it wasn't as effective, or it didn't deliver. And then they're very frustrated when somebody says, you need to get this edited. And they're thinking, I just spent $2,000 on that and I got nothing, So editing is an expensive and a very energy demanding portion of your writing process and your editing. So really make sure that you're using the best tools out there, and that you understand and you get to grow through this. Don't just have it done for you. Become a better editor, self-editing, so that in the future you can write more. So
yeah, we started with the story arc because that is the most important thing you can do for yourself and an editor can do for you. That you need to have that story arc straight before you do any other story editing, and it's really, really important to understand it. And then word count per scene comes in to help with the pacing. And then, of course, we've got scenes per chapter. And here you can see I've highlighted chapter 7, but you can scroll across here to have a look at where the bumps are. Or sorry, chapter 11 has 7 scenes, which is quite a lot compared to the others. So I would go, okay, I would look at this, and hopefully my editor has said something about it. Or if I'm editing myself, I would go look at this scene. And I've totally forgotten what chapter that was, chapter 11. So if I go down to chapter 11 and look at the first scene, which is, okay, the second scene. So by this point, am I in the right spot? No. So here, I'm not sure. Oh, there we are. I knew there was notes somewhere in here. So here, as I read through all the notes from the editor, by the time the editor got to here, they're thinking, wow, this scene's a bit long, or this chapter is a bit long, too many scenes. You can see where I've bolded here. There are 7 scenes in this chapter, making it a bit long. Consider ending the chapter after scene 35, which has a strong exit hook. Scene 36 has a strong entry hook, and there's also a gap in time. And so the editor has shown me, 1, that there's an issue, and 2, how to fix it, and 3, why. And so it's a very helpful thing when you're looking at scenes in a chapter, again, to look at your structure, because the reader, when they're reading, will notice that there's something different. And at this point, the story might start to drag because there's so many scenes in a chapter, and they're like, when am I getting to the end of this chapter? I want that feeling of accomplishment. And so again, it's an easy way for you to look at how can I get the balance right so it's a good read for my readers.
Exactly. So, and all of this allows you to go through it. And as you're going through this, you'll notice I'm putting up little banners there to talk to people about what we're talking about. But basically, we want to get to the point where when you have completed your structural story edit, and if you're using a story coach, or if you're not using a story coach, let's see if they deliver these things also, because what you're looking for are 5 deliverables. And in the end, they all come into a giant professional summary letter. And that should outline everything that they, all the feedback they want to give you. But the great thing is when you're using a software like this, or a systematic approach, is that you can actually cross-reference in there. You're not using the Excel that we were showing before, and you're, okay, where's chapter, and how's that, and what did my editor say? So you've got notes, and you've got a summary letter, and you got an Excel sheet, and you got a manuscript, and then you've got all the theory, And then you've got a bunch of terms that you may or may not be familiar with. So you're looking those up, what does that mean? How am I going to deal with that? And instead it's all in one case, which allows you to edit and also do some writing in there, because I noticed that a lot of your users are now starting to write within the StoryTeller and Story Coach afterwards, which is great. And I just wanted to mention that StoryTeller is for you to do it yourself. And that is really great because you're learning to do it yourself approach, and you do the story editing. And then after that, if you've done it well, then you follow up with a line editor. And we've done that with those people. But if at any point you want to have it done for you, or if you are struggling, it's not an easy thing. It's a new process. Becoming an editor takes years and years. So if you're struggling, then of course, that's when you reach out to a professional story coach, and they can walk this through, get it all done for you so that you can focus on the revisions instead of the 38 story elements. So it's a little bit of a balance, dance, whatever we're doing here. All right. So those are the things I'm going to mention. I know that I've had these numbered out here. Let me just get rid of this. You've got 5 key deliverables, and this is what we'd like for you to walk about around today, is that, when you are doing a structural story edit, either yourself or a professional editor should be able to accomplish these 5 things from at the end of the complete story edit. And again, remembering that this is the first stage of editing. It's when you're still developing your characters, you're making sure your plot is full, you're looking at every scene, you're going through your 5 key sections of the story arc. So when you're looking at this, the first thing you want to be able to do is know that you can plot your story arc. Evaluate it. Does it fit? Does it fit the form of a traditional story arc? And I think you have mentioned again and again that the brain, the human soul desires this format.
Yeah. So on the story arc, somebody has asked here, does the text need to be marked, or does Fictionary find the story arc? So Fictionary is actually designed to find it for you. And what it will do is when you import your manuscript, you import the whole thing at one go. And we use natural language processing and AI and a bunch of mathematical algorithms that goes through the manuscript, and it takes its best guess at where your scenes are. And by scenes, I mean the inciting incident, plot point 1, middle, plot point 2, and climax. And then it draws the story arc for you. You can change those on the evaluate page if you don't agree with Fictionary, but Fictionary is going to be close and you can look at it. And so say it says it's scene 20 and you think, it's really scene 22. Okay, fine. Then you just reset it and watch the story arc redraw. Every time you edit, add a scene, delete a scene, move chapters around, whatever, it redraws for you. So it's always up to date based on your latest edit. And if it's way off, it means there's an imbalance on your story and you need to figure out why. And if you say, like, let's say the inciting incident is marked as, scene 20, and really it's scene 5, that's a big gap. And so that means the word balance, the location, it's off. And so then you want to go back and say, okay, well, I know my inciting incident is scene 5. You got to figure out how to get the balance right. And why is it thinking it's way out here? So it's telling you if it didn't get it, it had a hard time finding it because the structure and balance of the story is off. And that's when you start looking at word count per scene or number of scenes per chapter, all of those things to see why it's off. And quite often it can be if you gave a really large word count to a scene that's not a key scene. Think, okay, why? So cut that scene and give more word count to your inciting incident kind of thing. And that's how you do that.
Excellent. Excellent. So, and I'm looking, do we have any other, I saw they're asking about personalization and marking and how to do that, but do you want to address those now or shall we come back?
Oh, we can come back. It's just because you were talking about the story arc and I happened to see a story arc question. I thought I'll throw that in there.
All right. So you're going to identify those 5 key scenes, which are in the story arc, and you should know what they are. I mean, you should know, right? And if you don't know, then either your editor should tell you, or the software should tell you, or you need to figure it out. But, you know, and this is why if you don't have the tool, or even if you have the tool but you don't understand why it's not working that way, the editor can go in and say, look, this is where it is, or this is where it should be, and these are the things that are missing. Or you've put it over here and we moved around, just like she demonstrated. So again, that's another key element that you need to be you need to achieve or receive from, you need to independently achieve during your self-edit, or you need to receive from your story coach to you know, have a very comprehensive and objective review and assessment of your manuscript. So, and then we didn't really go into this. We did last time a little bit, and we've done it on other sessions that we've talked about, is that, you know, not only is the word count important for the balance of the overall scene to scene, but what is the word count for your genre? And many people joined me last week, and you were in the Romance Writers Week with Pro Writing Aid, and there's a lot of talk about, you know, romance has a different pacing. It's a little bit more gentle. It's not as demanding in some areas, but more demanding than others. So if you know your niche, if you know your genre, then you know what you're looking for, and that story arc remains the same, but it adjusts towards the word count. And we need to have an editor who, one, specializes in your genre. And so you should be familiar with your genre. You know, what are the other editors that you love and you're imitating or emulating? What are they doing? You know, and if you don't know, then ask your editor. They'll be able to tell you. So, but it's all about pacing, and it's all about balance again and again and again. And that brings us into the balance of the word count, but you're reviewing the scenes and chapters so that they're also maintaining that theme throughout.
So here there's a question that relates to this, is how many scenes do you recommend per chapter? And this is where theming comes in. So there is no absolute number. If you write a story where there's one scene per chapter, be consistent and do that the whole way through. Don't throw in one chapter that has 2 scenes or 3 scenes or something. You want to be consistent. Lots of writers write with, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter, some variation through. And if you start early on where you vary the scenes per chapter, it's great. Just keep going with that. Where it gets you want to start thinking about the scenes per chapter is if you can theme them. And by theming, there's different ways of doing that. So if we look at Gone Girl, Nick, Amy, Nick, Amy, Nick, Amy, and that's how they theme chapters. Dead on it. And it's strict point of view control, and chapters are themed by point of view. There's other stories that theme chapters by action. So certain plot events go together. And you could see where the editor showed me split your chapter here. It was one scene in a training session, another scene with the bad guy, and they didn't fit together in a chapter. So the theming was off. So the 7 chapters was the trigger, or sorry, 7 scenes in the chapter was the trigger to say, is there something wrong here? And then you go and look for, well, what is wrong here? And you go, oh, it's actually 2 chapters, because one is about this plot event and one is about this. And so it's more important to understand the theming and why are you putting a scene in a chapter versus how many. So hopefully that answered that for Maya.
Excellent. Excellent. Good catch. And of course, then all of this gets wrapped up, all of those recommendations, all of those evaluations, everything that, you know, everything we're talking about right now are the kinds of comments and observations that your editor should be providing you with. And so there's a summary letter, and that summary letter, what we've kind of decided is that it shouldn't just tell you everything that needs to be fixed. It should also really point out what you're doing well, because when you do something well, not only is it important for your self-esteem and the energy that it gives you, and encouragement that you can carry on, but also then you know how to do it again. You really, if somebody says, oh, you've got the rhythm, you've got the beat, then you just repeat, and you can find that groove. But if you're never really validated or confirmed or verifying that, you know, I'm doing this right, you might miss out on that. So again, we want to look at what you've done well. And of course, they're going to give you a list of the revisions needed and why. And the why is very important. Again, you will, most writers will receive some definitions, some explanations that they just
Mhm.
don't understand. And that's normal. I mean, you've spent all your time writing. You're not spending your time editing. And editors, we're a little geeky. We get in there and we just start talking the talk. So what I love about when you work with this tool, and this is why when you use a story coach from us, you've got access to the tool for 2 months afterwards to do all those
Mhm.
revisions, is that the summary letter is inside next to your summary letter is there, and then you have all of your notes next to your manuscript, and then in those manuscript and notes you can click on any of the vocabulary and get the full definition and explanation.
Mhm.
And it's the same, this also ties in very well with your copy editing tool of Pro Writing Aid, because quite often they're recommending something, and this is the difference between a human and a computer, is that this is the rule. But they're not reading the whole sentence. It's not a human brain behind it saying, but I wanted to say it that way. It's dialect, or it's, whatever it may be. So it's really, really good to demand those five things. So again, your story arc, the location, your 5 key scenes, the evaluating of your word count per scene, your scenes and chapters for theme and balance, and then lastly, the summary letter with how to fix it. And
Mhm.
that's what we're going to be going on next week, and the 4th week is, how do we do this?